everyone. Today I am so lucky to be able to interview the incredible Rebecca Newman. Rebecca is an incredible poet and children's writer. Some of her poetry has been featured in the school magazine and a bunch of other places online. She also has 2 short stories coming out in an anthology this year. Last year she was even shortlisted for a flash fiction story, Fish, in the WA Writing Flashing the Cover Flash Fiction Competition. That's a lot of flash in it. How awesome is she?
Thank you very much for having me, Imani.
I find Rebecca to be an inspirational author because of how she runs workshops to get kids inspired and excited about reading and writing, which is really incredible. Also because her poetry is so amazing, I love how I can picture what is happening and how fun and quirky it is. Rebecca, thank you so much for letting me grill you.
Thanks for grilling me, I think. Ready to roll.
Are you ready to get started?
I am.
Completely unrelated to your work, you have a kitchen garden. I love growing food and herbs too. What do you grow in it?
Okay, so in our garden here, we've always grown tomatoes and lettuce, and that's used in a lot of our cooking at home, and cucumbers as well. But because 2020 we're at home a fair bit, I have also expanded out. So we have a few other things we're growing: parsley and basil and passion fruit. And yeah, that's about it for the moment. So, and I have lots of little flowers and things too. So I usually interplant things with marigolds and that kind of thing for companion planting to keep pests away. And just because I like have a few flowers in there as well. Yeah. So it's not a very big.
But still, that's amazing. We grow tomato and lettuce and cucumber too, as well as herbs.
Herbs is good because you can use herbs in so many different things and they freeze really well. So yeah, we're big fans of growing herbs in our garden too.
And they taste so good.
They do.
Following on from that, if you could grow any plant at all, what would it be? It can be real or imaginary.
Okay, so I'm going to say carrots, which doesn't sound very exciting, but I have had several goes at growing carrots and they're always a fail in our garden. They grow, I don't know what they do when they grow them for the shops, but ours are always twisted and not very happy and full of dirt in between all the twisted bits. And so now I don't grow carrots anymore. So I'm going to say carrots because in your imaginary question, my carrots are perfect and I'm a great carrot grower. So I'm choosing carrots. Have you grown carrots in your garden?
Yes, they hug each other. They're clinging to life to each other. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they're quite artistic and sculptural carrots in the home garden, I think. So I don't know what magic they do in the ones that are grown for the shops, but I don't have that magic, sadly. My carrots are, yes, not show-worthy carrots. They're not very, they're pretty interesting looking.
Taste good. And as long as they're edible, I think they're good. Carrots.
The carrots that I've grown haven't even tasted very good. They're kind of dry and not very happy. So I don't think I have the carrot. I'm not in the carrot zone. So yes, that's why I'd like to be able to grow carrots. If I could grow anything and grow it well, that would be on my list.
Fair enough. What has been your favourite piece of poetry to work on? The hardest question for everyone.
It's quite hard. I was thinking about this because you did warn me about this question coming up, and I think it would have to be a poem that I wrote about a bullock, which was inspired by a Judith Wright poem called Bullocky. And I actually came to write it because I used to have a blog. The blog is still up there, but we don't tend to use it anymore, called Poetry Tag, that I ran with Sally Murphy, who's another WA children's poet. And she gave me a couple of word prompts. And one of them was ox, which was quite a tricky word to work into a poem. But I ended up doing a whole heap of research on bullocks and ox in Australian history. And I wrote a poem from a bullock's point of view. So I found that really, really interesting to do, the whole researching into their point in history and choosing which bits to put in and which bits to leave out, because the poem's not very, well, the poems that I write are not very long, so I couldn't include everything that I found out about bullocks. So yeah, that was a really interesting exercise. So I think that's the poem I'm going to choose. So it's still online at the Poetry Tag site, which is poetrytag.wordpress.com. But yeah, so that's been there for a while, but we haven't updated the site for a while. So that's not a very recent poem. That was probably a couple of years ago now.
That's really cool. I'll have to check it out and read it.
In your free time, because it's in school holidays, in between all your research and interview prep, you maybe go and have a look.
What has been the funniest thing you have written?
This is a really tricky question because funny is quite subjective. So the sort of poetry that I write, or the funny kind of poems that I like to write, are not funny all the way through. I like to have a little twist at the end, which turns them into a funny poem. So I don't know if I can really pick one poem out of my lineup, but the most recent funny poem that I've had published is the one that was in Fire, Burn, Cauldron, Bubble, which is about somebody making a potion, and that had the little twist at the end that was quite funny. So I guess the funniest poems I write are the ones that have a little twist at the end of the poem, and all of my funny poems tend to be a bit like that. I'm not really a slapstick writer, so yeah, it's more the style than one single poem is my funniest, I guess. So I write a lot of different styles. I have those ones that are kind of funny with a twist at the end, and then other poems that are kind of more thoughtful or pensive, pondering different things, or about everyday life, or complaining kind of poems, things that I'm not happy about, that kind of thing. Sometimes good to work things through by putting them into a poem.
I will also have to check out the anthology. I might head on down to
I have here to show you if you like. Dun, dun, dun.
That looks so cool.
It's quite cool. I was very excited. So it was supposed to be out, originally I thought that it would be out in October 2019. I think they changed illustrators. So it ended up being out in October 2020 in the UK, or late September, and then it didn't really hit the bookshops here until December because of all the supply chain delays with all the COVID things that have gone on. So it was very exciting to finally get it. It's called Fire, Burn, Cauldron, Bubble, Magical Poems chosen by Paul Cookson, and the illustrations are by Eilish Muldoon. She's a Scottish illustrator, and they're really cute. So that's the page that mine's on, and it's even got a little illustration at the bottom there, which is
so cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So yes, and I know that you can buy it in various bookshops in Australia now, and I know Paperbird in Fremantle does have some in stock at the moment if anyone's interested in that. I don't get any kickback from that, because when you have a poem in an anthology, quite often they pay you a one-off fee for your poem rather than royalties, because it's a bit tricky with so many people in an anthology to be paying everybody tiny amounts of royalties every time they sell a book. So yeah, I don't make squillions if you go and buy a copy of the book, but I'd love you to own a copy of my book. It would be fabulous. So that's that one there.
I'll go track it down.
That's right.
You did a Paperbird Fellowship in 2019. What did you work on during this time?
Okay, so that feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? With 2020 seemed to take over everything. So that was at the very end of 2019. I had a whole term in Paperbird, and what I was working on was a collection, my own collection of children's poetry. So when you have an anthology of poems, but they're all poems by the same person, it's called a collection. So my poetry collection is tentatively titled Rules for Sneezing, and I know from reading lots of other children's poetry collections and anthologies that you need around 60 to 70 poems. So what I was doing at Paperbird was writing some new poems to get enough poems to make a suitable collection, and also going back through some of my earlier poems that have been published in the school magazine and ones that I've just written before that needed a bit of polishing, and checking them over and seeing if they needed improving and changing them out. And then that was my main project, and a little bit on the side I was finishing off and polishing a picture book called Grandfather's Violin that I've been working on for a couple of years, just in little pockets of side time, to try and get that one finished so I could submit it to publishers. And so, yeah, had 2 little projects, but the poetry collection was my main one. And I was in the room, there were 2 of us with the fellowship at the same time. So I was working in a room with another WA children's writer called Sharon Giltru, and she was working on a novel at the time. So we were both in there typing away and writing away, and it was very inspiring. Yeah, it was really great.
I just interviewed Sharon and she mentioned you too. So that's
there
awesome that you got to work near each other.
It was actually really inspiring to be working. So we were in 2 days a week, and there was only 1 day a week that we were both in on the same day, and then the other day we were each on a different day. But it was quite inspiring to have somebody else working alongside you, and we could, you know, lean back and ask questions or run something by each other if we wanted to test something out and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was actually really nice to have another writer there, and we could encourage each other. So yeah, it's good to have a buddy in there at the same time. We're very pleased, and we hadn't met each other before, so that was also nice to have another new writer friend to move on the journey together. Good. And she's had a picture book published since then, and a couple of contracts signed as well. So yeah, it was a good creative time in there at Paperbird, the end of 2019.
It is one of my big goals to do a fellowship there as well. So
excellent. So what project would you work on if you went in there? Have you got something on the go?
I've got lots of things on the go. But if I could pick one, it'd probably be either the sequel to my current middle grade book, if I have rewritten it by then, or work on the YA book that I'm currently writing. 2 completely different age groups, but I love them both. Yeah,
well, it would be a really good chance to just kind of focus for 2 days and get lots of writing and editing and rewriting done. It's good when you go in there because your brain kind of goes, right, here I am. This is the job I'm going to do now. So I tend to get a lot more done. If I'm trying to write at home, I'm usually trying to do lots of little things on the side, and I check the mail and hang out the washing, and you can't do any of that if you're down at Paperbird. You just put your head down and get lots of writing done. So yeah, it was actually a really productive time for me. And I wrote, while I was there, one of the poems that I wrote for the collection, I also entered in a little children's poetry competition, and I came second in it. So that was good too, because if I hadn't had the fellowship, I wouldn't have been writing the poems. So yeah, it's definitely a very productive time. I recommend if you want to apply for the fellowship, it's definitely worth applying for.
I shall. One of your short stories was shortlisted for a flash fiction competition. How are you feeling about being shortlisted?
I was very excited because it was the first time that I'd written a piece of flash fiction. It's hard to say that, isn't it? So I think the brief for that particular competition was that it had to be a story told in 100 words or fewer. So flash fiction is really, really short, like microfiction, really short stories. You can't muck around much, but it has a lot of similarities to poetry. So actually the story that I put in for the competition was started out life as a poem written a long time ago. Every January I try and get a bit of poetry written because I've got a lot more free time, not running around so much like the rest of the year. And it was an old poem that I'd had stored away in one of my files that I got out and reworked to be a flash fiction piece. But it does have a lot in common with poetry because you can't use too many words. You've only got 100 words, so there's a lot of cutting out and editing that goes on, and you just have to tell it in one tiny little kind of box. Yeah, so I was really thrilled when it was shortlisted, because I hadn't tried that format before, and I then went on to write a couple of other little pieces of flash fiction. So it's something I would like to try a bit more this year as well, having had my first taste for it. And it's good because you can kind of sit down and get a draft written in one little session and then edit it and improve on it after that. I find it's not easier than a longer work, but I do find it easier for my brain to get around having like a draft of the whole story there in one session. So that suits me quite well. So yeah, I was absolutely thrilled.
That's amazing. It's such a huge achievement. You should definitely be proud.
Oh, thank you. That's very pleased.
Back to your paperbird fellowship. Do you have any cool stories from there?
So I guess my coolest story was that I wrote the poem Bubble Wrap Stomp, and that was the poem that I entered in a competition and then came second in. So I wouldn't have had that poem to enter if I hadn't been doing the fellowship. And the other thing is that there are a lot of creative people coming and going from Paperbird. There's people working in the studio out the back, so I got to chat to them from time to time and see what they were working on. And then at the end of the fellowship, I had a presentation with Sally Murphy, who I've mentioned before, and we were in conversation about children's poetry upstairs in the gallery as kind of a wind-up debriefing event at the end of the fellowship. So that was really great too, because there's not a lot of conversation that goes on in the public space about children's poetry. There's some, and that's fantastic. So it was just really great to be able to add something into the mix and to have a room full of people that were also championing children's poetry and celebrating it. So that was a real highlight as well, and a really fantastic way to finish off that fellowship project that I was doing, because at the end of the fellowship you've done all this work on something, but it's not you haven't got something that you can necessarily show off yet, because it's still a work in progress. So that was a good kind of way to finish things and close things off. Yeah.
It's amazing. It sounds even more awesome every time.
It was pretty awesome.
Now we are moving on to the speed round. So rapid fire round. 10-second answers, 4 to 5 words, no explanations. We have a bell. I'll ask a question, you have 10 seconds to answer it. Once the bell goes off, stop. No explaining.
Okay. All right, no explaining. Got it.
What are you writing at the moment?
I'm writing a middle grade novel set in Fremantle.
What is your favourite meal to eat for dinner?
Roast. Especially if someone else.
What is your least favourite book genre to read and why?
Horror or thriller, because it's just too stressful.
What was your worst subject in school?
Phys ed, except when we did ballroom dancing, because I had medals in ballroom dancing and it was the only time I ever got picked for sport first. The rest of the time, definitely my worst.
Who was your favourite or most inspirational author from your childhood?
Robin Klein.
Which book character would you love to meet and why?
So I don't know if you've read Playing Beatty Bow, but I'd really love to meet Granny Talisker. She's a really wise woman, and I know I'm not supposed to give explanations, but she also has magical kind of fairy.
What's the weirdest thing you've written about?
Okay, the weirdest thing is about a Banksia montana mealybug.
If you could go anywhere in the world and write about that place, where would you go?
I would do a time slip somehow back to when my grandparents were alive and hang out with them for a while, because my grandmother played in a band in a little country town, and I'd really just love to go to a night for that and be able to write about that, having been there.
What's your biggest achievement so far?
I think my biggest achievement so far, which sounds really boring, is just persistence, because I've had many, many, many years of not having any successes, but I just keep at it. And in 2020, even though it was a terrible year for many, many reasons, on my writing front, it was really great. I had an anthology come out. I had a poem in another anthology come out. It's a haiku. I had a Christmas carol set to music and performed by the Giovanni Consort at some St Mary's Cathedral in Perth. And yeah, I had shortlistings and all sorts of things. So that was a very exciting year. So I think persistence is my best achievement in writing.
Do you have any advice to share with young writers?
Okay, so obviously persistence is my first piece of advice, because that's what's worked for me. But also I think starting from if you don't know what to write about, starting from a point of something that is around you right now is a really good thing to get yourself going. So you might just say, I'm sitting in a chair and I'm talking to my interviewer on a Zoom chat, and then you can take it from there. It's much better to have something on the page than nothing. So, you know, if you're a bit stuck, writing anything down that is around you at the moment is a really good place to just get started and get some words down.
Amazing advice. Thank you very much for letting me grill you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for grilling me. It's really fun to be talking about poetry and writing with another writer.
Make sure to check out Rebecca on her social media, buy the anthologies she's in, and like, follow, share, subscribe, whatever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.